be ready for it when it happens. Don't worry about it. So anyway, I said that I hate to say it, but I actually agree with Taylor Lorenz here. Not only is it potentially illegal for not disclosing a paid promotion, but it's also fun to things are happening quickly. And so really kids being involved and being interested in more simplistic games like Roblox, I don't really think should come as a surprise to anyone. And I think that if you go back and you look at a lot of the games that you probably played as a kid, especially like under 13, the majority of them probably were simplistic. And even games that have like a perception of complexity, like Legend of Zelda, are not really complex, right? Halo's not really complex. Like mini games are pretty simple, right? You like Diablo 2. Like Diablo 2 is a simplistic game if you want to play it that way. You just run around and you just hit things and that's it. And that's the way that a lot of kids play games, for sure. And so because video games and Roblox are designed for a 9-year-old, then big surprise, they're going to appeal to 9-year-olds. That's really it. So yeah, and let's go back if I find a few. The illusion of complexity. Is what they did best. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Mario 64 was so pure. Exactly. You didn't need to know a bunch of systems for Mario 64. You just had to jump around and get the stars. Just go get the stars, idiot. That's it. And I think that's the main reason why you have a lot of people nowadays that aren't really able to, what do you call it? They're not really able to understand that. And I think that many of them, you know, they're not really interested in learning 50 new systems. They don't want to do that. They just want to play a simple game that doesn't have a lot of complexity and just relax and chill out. And that's all there is to it. How do you feel about Rested XP in terms of Classic WoW? I mean, any paid add-on is bad. I mean, it's against the TOS to have paid add-ons. I think paid add-ons are bad. But I mean, like in terms of like the functionality of the add-on, it's totally
you're absolutely sure
like people should be able to play video games the way they want. Like this is the way I view things, right? Is that whenever you're playing like a game like Elden Ring, if you want to mod in having a tank and then blowing up every boss in one hit with the tank, you should be able to do that because it's your game. You should do what you want. Now, I don't think that you should play a game that way, and I don't think it's really conducive to having like a good experience enjoying a game. But at the same time, I think that there's a lot of people that do that, and there's nothing wrong with it. It's totally fine. So yeah, that's my speed. Yeah, exactly. And so it depends on what people want to do. And for me personally, like I generally prefer simplistic games. The reasons why is because I just don't want to think. I don't want to think whenever I'm playing video games. I'm going to be honest. I don't want to think. I just want to sit there. I just want to play the game. I don't want to worry about anything. I don't want to have to plan anything. I don't want to have to use a lot of mental energy for this. I just want to fucking go and just pop off, right? I just want to play the game. No think gaming. It's Elden Ring. So you look at the dragon, go fucking hit him in the head. All right, let's go get him done. That's it. And so it's simple. And that's it. That's why you can't play RuneScape? Well, I don't know. But replaying Armored Core 6 has been fun. Yeah, cause the Switch is coming. You just got hella casual games. Yeah, I already have so many. The thing is for me, like just this morning, right? I had to make 2 or 3 pretty important decisions this morning. So I have like a degree of like decision fatigue that happens where I don't want to make decisions by the time it's like fucking the evening and the sun's down. I don't want to make any more fucking decisions. I just want to sit back and fucking play a game. And I think there's a lot of guys that feel that way. And I know it sounds kind of like, oh, I just want to be retarded. Yeah.
Don't eat my plants. Don't eat.
Pretty much.
Don't eat my plants.
Sure.
Don't eat my
Absolutely.
plants. Don't eat my plants. Don't eat my plants.
Oh my gosh. Ah. I know you're about to bite me. Ow! But
She's happy. Look, she's happy.
oh my god.
Come on, buddy. Okay. Whoa.
Let me see.
Hello guys and gals, me Mutahar, and I know I've been talking about the internet the last couple months, right? How things are changing so rapidly. But you know, we're at a point where one of the largest communities on the internet, one of the OG internet communities, 4chan, is now suing a government, okay? They're actually involved in a lawsuit. So I don't want to jump into it too quickly, ladies and gentlemen. I just want to kind of start off in the broad sense. I don't want to make this video or these set of videos all about doom scrolling, okay? A quick TLDR of getting some level of privacy right now, right here, is if you need any VPN right now, a good VPN, go to something like Mulvad, okay? They've been raided by the feds, nothing has been found. If you want something even stronger, you don't want to microdose the internet privacy, go to the Tor browser, download it for your operating system, maybe even your phone, and get started, okay? Access online platforms like Dread so you can talk to people, you can have a conversation with a human being without having a government read every single word that you're doing or prevent you from accessing the internet. So one of the lawsuits that I saw came out from 4chan and Lolcow, which would be the Kiwi Farm. So two websites on the internet that are known for being kind of the, I would say, the last bastions of anonymity, freedom in a way too, where you can make an account, say whatever is on your mind, even if what is on your mind generally isn't accepted by the terms of services for 99% of the internet, okay? The internet used to be a place where anonymity was kind of a thing. Now it seems like every government wants you to present a fucking valid driver's license ID to access video games, to access social media services, to access anything that could potentially be distressing to a child. Which, by the way, the government can freely define what is distressing to any child. And we have to figure out a way to fight back. Otherwise, this whole journey that we've had together, it changes worldwide. We literally will live in a new world order, okay? As crazy as some of the cyberpunk dystopia you've seen, this is the future. So, of course, looking into this, they say in their lawsuit, the internet is a global system of communication between computer servers located in data centers around the world. So inside this lawsuit, they've said that the internet, despite its global reach, is acknowledged that it's an American innovation, which is true. The internet was produced by the United States first, and then it allowed us to connect to the world. So in a short term, okay, the internet is kind of like a set of technologies that allow computers to communicate with each other, servers to interact. And on an international level, there are agreements between internet service providers, tier 1 connectors, to be able to exchange a mass amount of information. So what started as an American invention turned into an international phenomenon. This is the first website ever made, info.kern.ch. You can go to this website right now. You can even browse it in a simulator. The internet came from very humble beginnings, but the internet was always a decentralized-ish platform where, again, it was just computers being able to talk to each other. Unfortunately, the internet requires us to sign up to internet service providers, and of course some of those internet service providers have agreements with each other to share data. It's decentralized in theory, but for most users it is unfortunately centralized. And the scary part of this is some governments can pressure the internet service provider to block access to certain internet sites. So what has been happening to 4chan, for anybody that doesn't know or they're not in the loop about it, I made a video about this, I would say probably a few days ago, but they were investigating 4chan, the message boards, and said that apparently they wanted to see if this 4chan board failed to comply with the obligations of the Online Safety Act. So, okay, basically 4chan was failing to comply with the bullshit law the UK people built up. And I want to also say, for me, this is a huge deal because even though I'm not a UK resident, I, being a Canadian, know that what's happening in one part of the world, and if it succeeds, could easily start happening in Canada, could easily start happening in the United States. Hell, there are states where, again, they have ID verification laws. So you have to be really careful, and you have to really look at the forest for the trees. This is a united effort. Not just one country is going through this. So one piece of misinformation I do want to correct is something that had shown up around the time of this launch. This banner never existed. From what it seems, the United Kingdom is still actually able to access 4chan. So according to 4chan, they're getting fined $20,000, okay, and then daily penalties afterwards. So here's the thing, if you're a small site, and 4chan's not a major site by any imagination, they're not Google, they're not YouTube, they're not Facebook, where they literally have it in the budgets for fining, okay? This is a site that this could absolutely cripple financially if this law keeps going. Now the thing is, 4chan has said that they're not going to even bother going. They're just like saying, fuck you. First off, we're an American company, okay? You can't do shit to us. And being the fact that 4chan doesn't have offices or any tangible assets in the UK, from my understanding, legally at least speaking, cannot garnish any money out of them. So to go back to this lawsuit, the best thing about it is obviously 4chan has not just fought back, well, 4chan and the Kiwi Farms guys, but they've also brought up, again, a ruling that they want that sort of separates them from ever being targeted again. So they even say 4chan is under the laws of Delaware, okay? They're literally in Delaware, the state in the United States, okay? And of course, when it came to the guys over at the Kiwi Farms, they're in the West Virginia state, okay? They're in West Virginia. They have their own laws to deal with. So they say that 4chan is controversial, but it operates fully in compliance with the laws of the US, which is true. You may not like the speech on 4chan or any of these sites, but one thing is understandable. They do not have any content that would be deemed illegal by the United States. Contents like CSAM, for instance, and I believe like violent messaging or like promotion of violence is generally banned on every single one of these platforms. So anything that would not fall under the First Amendment of the United States, which there are some exceptions, is completely like valid, okay? If as long as you're not violating the First Amendment through some of its exceptions, you will be fine, okay? The First Amendment does not protect, I think, against violent uprising or just like violent calls of threat, and obviously CSAM material. Like that is, these are just things that are not allowed to be free speech. So what the guys over at 4chan and the farms had said was that according to Ofcom, they targeted these guys not because of neutral enforcement, but because of overly political reasons aimed at undermining the First Amendment. And I actually kind of agree here because a lot of the stuff that would be discussed on sites like 4chan, if you go onto like boards like Poll, for instance, would be a lot of discussion regarding, again, the political situations in these countries. Obviously, you may or may not agree with whatever they're writing, but the thing is, there should be a level of freedom to discuss people's like individual like thoughts and feelings, as long as obviously they're not violating that First Amendment in any way. I think if you put aside your left-right nonsense, I think what's more important here is the principle, which is free speech and the ability to have an open internet where people can communicate, where people can talk, instead of having a surveillance state that wants to control every single thing that we say. So they basically say that, again, their actions were to undermine American First Amendments by targeting just American companies that didn't really have anything in the UK other than users from their country would log onto their platform, they said that no, they don't want to have their stuff suppressed because one government on the other side of the world now wants to decide for everyone what they're doing. Now, of course, they want a declaration from the courts that their attempts, the UK's attempts, were improper and invalid, so that hopefully it never happens again. A permanent injunction prohibiting this shit Ofcom from issuing any orders or demands without proper service through the US-UK Mutual Legal Assistance Treaty. So again, they want them to go through the proper channels, not just have crazy overreach on everybody. So I actually side with the plaintiffs entirely when it comes to this lawsuit, because even though obviously their sites probably consist of things that I or you may not agree with, the reality is one government, the UK, is deciding what the fuck me and you get to read every single day on the internet. They get to decide what stays up and what doesn't stay up. And I don't really agree with that, and you shouldn't agree with that either. The reality is, okay, if this was some small, no-name country, in the middle of like Central Africa or like India or something, right, where like, yeah, some countries can be big or not, the UK is a little bit different. The UK is kind of an international hub. It's a very relevant country for every other country around, okay? There's a lot of countries that don't really interact with each other. Like, for instance, if China was trying to implement a law like this, or for instance, Russia does this a lot, where like, for Twitch TV or like platforms, they'll fine you like, but it doesn't really matter, okay? Because a lot of countries have already kind of like, drawn a line in the sand when it comes to operating or sanctioning countries like Russia or even China in that case. And they're kind of detached from the Western world in that idea, a free Western world. But obviously the UK is very much a relevant player. And if they're trying to control speech 1984 style, we've got some fucking problems. Now, obviously, I've talked about internet censorship, and the thing about it is, internet censorship is sort of like the small potatoes in the room, because what's kind of unfortunately happened over here is that we really are looking at a massive surveillance state. So I'm going to admit right here that I'm getting full, I'm getting full conspiratorial right now. I'm really talking about conspiracies here, simply because what I have here isn't something that is a breadcrumb trail. You know how I make like a crypto investigation and I guide you from point A to point B, and it's like you can do it yourself? This is just my thoughts now running, and I kind of want to walk you through it because it really is something that I've been noticing over the last like few months, probably over the year. So obviously with 4chan and like the farms fighting a lawsuit over here, and it's a noble effort that obviously, it will have far-reaching impacts. Like if they lose, it can be pretty bad. And if they win, it might save at least our side of the pond when it comes to internet freedoms and privacy. But when it comes to just privacy in general, one thing that I saw pretty spooky, and I saw this on Louis Rossman's channel, was the rise of AI surveillance, okay? Playing something like Watch Dogs, a game that came out, almost 10 years ago, a little over 10 years ago now, was a game that had you playing as a vigilante in Chicago where like the entire city was smart controlled. There was surveillance systems that were watching and profiling everyone. I almost feel like somebody from the fucking future came back to work at Ubisoft and painted a future for what the world would be. It's a game where tens of thousands of cameras exist that monitor every single thing a person does. So Louis Rossmann has a consumer rights wiki where he actually did talk about this. This is the Flock license plate readers, right? Which I guess were known as the Flock Safety Falcon, and they're AI-powered security cameras that start to record vehicles for law enforcement agencies. Now you might be like, well, Muda, what is this? What are we talking about with this Flock Safety? Now in the United States, these are camera networks that are set up. They look similar to this, okay? You probably have seen this when you're driving by places. But the idea of this is that these are LPR cameras, which are license plate recognition cameras that can be placed anywhere to capture detailed data about license plates and vehicles used to commit crimes. So it sounds like, yeah, we're making this literally to stop criminals, right? Like this is the first and foremost way. We want a system that prevents criminals from committing crime. And look, you might sit there and be like, wow, that's a good idea, Muda. I mean, what do you have an issue with this? Are you for crime? Absolutely not. I hate crime just as much as the average person does. But the thing about this is that this system is operating in 49 states and doing 20 billion vehicle scans monthly. And the reality of it is you don't have any option to dial away from it. And the data that they have, according to, again, the Consumer Rights Wiki, could be brought into Palantir. That's a video I'm making a little bit later. Palantir is a huge project, and it's a very, very interesting personal project of mine because talk about some shady stuff. But basically the crux here is that they're using artificial intelligence to create what are known as vehicle fingerprints. So for instance, your car, when it drives past one of these cameras, will have a fingerprint created. Now obviously, if they've got tens of thousands of these cameras nationwide in the US, imagine just for a second what that means. That means if the other camera starts picking up your vehicle and then the third camera picks up your vehicle using artificial intelligence, because now we don't need to hire people to actually do the grunt work for us. Now we can just feed all this data into an AI and it can process, tens of thousands of human man hours in a fraction of the time. And so now the AI is now cataloging exactly where you're going from. So the creepy part about it is you probably can't avoid a main road. I know that I can't avoid main roads and highways when I have to go from place to place, city to city. So we now live in a world that is literally 1984. And you might be like, didn't they have this kind of technology before? Yes, we've had CCTV cameras before. We did not have AI-powered surveillance cataloging every single thing that we do. And so the thing is, you actually pay money to the government in taxes every year, and that money is being used to set up these fucking cameras through this third-party company that is working with law enforcement, all the glowies and everything to spy effectively on you. You're paying for your own spying. It's crazy shit. And even if you don't have a license plate, they have artificial intelligences and systems that can still track you even without that license plate provided. And there have been some creepy situations, one that I'll bring up right over here, where a law enforcement officer, a police chief in Kansas, used that same technology 164 times, by the way, to track an ex-girlfriend. Imagine that. The fucking boys in blue that you pay money in taxes. Don't ever date one, because if you make them jilted, they'll use a goddamn AI tracking tool to fucking find you. That's how scary it is, okay? That's how crazy this shit can get. And you might be like, but Muda, okay, that's just one thing. What about the effectiveness of it too? Well, let's talk a little bit about the effectiveness of being spied constantly. In Austin, Texas, they're currently fighting for this and talking about this shit. And Sarah Hamid from EFF went out and said in her own city, she showed a 0.2 success rate in terms of arrest per scan. Just imagine. You have Minority Report the movie, okay? But instead of that, Tom Cruise can't even arrest anybody. He can't even arrest himself. The Minority Report AI doesn't even work the best, okay? It just sits there cataloging everyone and barely contributes to any actionable thing. And there's a whole bunch of other reasons where these cameras actually do more harm than they do good. So the thing is, we now are paying to live in our own little surveillance state. So forget just the internet censorship. It seems like everywhere you go to, at least with the advent of things like AI and all these tools, it really is the next stage in tracking every single thing that you and I want to do, okay? So first off, they want to see what you're doing on the internet. They want to take away that little bit of anonymity from you. And the reason why I talked about these cameras as well is that these cameras are designed to be a deterrent when it comes to people, behaving as they normally would. They want to create a docile surveillance state that effectively falls into line. And whether they're achieving this on the internet or in reality through these AI-powered surveillance tools, it really seems like a lot of this technology that's coming out to light, especially when it comes to things like artificial intelligence, I have mostly seen it used in nefarious purposes, and I see very little. There are good uses for artificial intelligence, but generally speaking, I have seen more of the dystopia, more of the Black Mirror, than I have the actual good side of it, which is alarming. And of course, obviously, at the end of all this comes the last bastion of true internet freedom, which would be the dark web. I've covered this for years. I've talked about the dark web. I would consider myself to be somewhat of an expert onto just browsing the dark web in general. Okay, I think I've done it for years. I've seen every goddamn website, every hoax at this point, throughout my years just browsing this side of the internet. And obviously 2 days ago, an article comes out from the guys over at The Guardian. Privacy at a cost. The dark web's main browser helps pedo networks flourish. Now, again, I don't want to discount and say that the dark web doesn't have illegal shit on it. I have definitely come across illegal stuff, illegal communities. I've covered illegal communities on the dark web. I've come across, the hitman websites, the mafia sites, the drug vendor sites. Now, I can't confirm if these sites are actually real, valid, or honeypots because I've never went beyond a cursory glance or, infiltrated these communities because ultimately, it's still illegal stuff. Why jump into it? The thing about it is, there is bad stuff happening, but there's also a lot more bad stuff happening in the clear web. So for instance, millions of predators are forming sprawling online communities on the dark web using the Tor network. And that's true. There might be predators, but I would argue there's probably more predators sitting on sites like Roblox, probably sitting on platforms like Discord, than there are just people on the dark web. You honestly think that children are downloading the Tor browser and connecting to a fucking Onion website that changes every so often just to talk with people online? Or are they probably sitting on the most popular online video games and messaging platforms where these predators are hunting individuals on, okay? I get it, the dark web is scary. You can misrepresent every single thing you see on the internet, but I have made tons of videos on the dark web, and I would say a vast majority of the websites that I've seen have probably just been goofy, edgy things, or very lighthearted stuff. For fuck's sake, I learned how to make cookies. Legal cookies, okay? Legal cookies, by the way, not drug ones, off the dark web. So of course, they try to actually pin it on the web, and they actually have said, we've talked to the dark web people about stopping this, repeated warnings of a growing number of predators taking advantage. But this is when, like, even they don't understand what they're talking about. Because, again, they do say the privacy architecture has created a safe haven for predators. And the thing is, when you have something that is designed for human freedom and human privacy, there are going to be people that find ways to abuse it, right? That's unfortunately a reality. But you're also ignoring the value that comes and has come from the dark web and true anonymity, which is that people have been able to speak against evil regimes, people have been able to send messages to their loved and family and friends without government surveillance stopping them or government surveillance hindering how they communicate with people. There's a lot of reasons why you would use the dark web for completely legitimate reasons. And of course, they're pinning all of this stuff onto the dark web. And I really feel like a politician, once they realize that, okay, we can't really stop VPNs, but we can try to. What is that next layer of technology that can't be stopped? Well, obviously, it's the dark web. Obviously, that's going to be the next bit of technology that I think a lot of these organizations try to fight for. And so they're going to start looking at the relay nodes. They're going to start looking at the exit nodes. They're going to start looking at all of this technology and how, again, they can push that censorship, push that surveillance into more invasive parts of the web that realistically shouldn't have that. Ladies and gentlemen, we live in a wild world, okay? We live in a world where 4chan and the Kiwi Farms is suing an entire government. We live in a world where cameras are watching every single thing that we do, where we drive to, building up a repository of information that they can share with politicians and fucking government agencies and glowies, and basically decide, hey, that guy is a risk factor. Because let's imagine you're living in like a very liberal state and you're like a conservative guy. What if you're put onto a list? What if you're put onto like monitoring? What if it's vice versa? You're like a bleeding heart liberal living in the middle of Texas. Imagine they do the same thing to you. It's not a left to right thing. It's literally the upper class, the governments, okay, the elites, who are trying to turn the people under them, directly under them, into cattle, okay? And right now, the only people that are getting rich off of this shit are the fucking big-ass billionaires running these tech companies that are selling AI surveillance tools, to the government just to basically create the surveillance state that we're living in. It's a fucked up world. And if you're not looking at all of this, if you're not noticing any of this, if you're not recognizing any of this stuff, I know some people consider that to be like a dog whistle or something, but really, this is a pattern of government surveillance, government censorship, government overreach that people should be looking at. Instead of fighting amongst each other for a second, okay? Put the fucking arguments down, okay? Put the Twitter down. Stop arguing. Just think for a second. In a year or two, will the internet look the exact same as you once envisioned it? Will it be a place where you can freely discuss what you want, or is it a place that's already just taken away from you? What future do you want, okay? You can either put aside the bullshit fighting right now and talk to your congressman, talk to your congresswoman, talk to anybody, okay, to stop this shit right here and right now. Or for the next foreseeable future, you can lose all your access. You can lose all your freedom and ability to freely speak your mind. Anyways, this is me, Mutahar, and I am out.
Hello wonderful person, this is Anton, and today we're going to dive back into one of the most enigmatic mysteries in the history of observational astronomy, the by now infamous WOW signal. The intense radio burst detected back in 1977 that for several decades now has puzzled astronomers and of course fueled our imagination about the potential source, while also bringing up the very important question of are we alone in the universe? Because even today, this is technically one of the most intriguing unexplained radio phenomena ever detected by astronomers. But here's the thing. After nearly 50 years, several new, detailed analysis-based papers, mostly focusing on reanalysis of the initial discovery, uncovered several somewhat surprising discoveries, providing a comprehensive re-evaluation that significantly changed some of the previous assumptions about the signal, and of course about what potentially created it. And so in this video, let's discuss some of the most recent discoveries, but first I guess let's start with the initial discovery and what we've known so far for many years. And so I guess here, let's start with a quick refresher. This was detected on August 15, 1977, and it was originally heard by this telescope right here, OSURO, Ohio State University's Radio Observatory, more commonly referred to as the Big Ear. The telescope that joined the newly formed SETI in order to try to discover signals from extraterrestrial intelligence. And well, to date, this was the most incredible and actually the only such discovery involving an incredibly intense narrowband radio signal, showing a lot of attributes expected from a technological transmission from outer space. And so when astronomer Jerry Ackman reviewed the original data that you can see printed right here, he simply wrote, "Wow." Although here the common misconception is that these letters and these numbers were the actual message. It's not. Here the letters and the numbers simply represent the total intensity of the signal. And in this case, it was super intense. But what exactly made this so unusual on top of intensity, and why are we still talking about the signal even after 50 years? Well, first of all, the signal here lasted for approximately 72 seconds. And this is actually the result of the night skies drifting due to the Earth's rotation, with the intensity in this case following the expected Gaussian beam pattern that you can kind of see summarized right here. And so there was a gradual increase, then a peak, followed by a decrease, expected from a distant stationary object of extreme radio intensity. But crucially, it was also detected in the 1420 MHz frequency, also referred to as the hydrogen line, something that back then was potentially expected to be used by any extraterrestrial intelligence that would want to communicate. Yet despite follow-up observations, and despite additional observations looking at every other object in the galaxy, so far no additional signals have been ever discovered again. And so because of this, for decades, there's always been the limitation when it comes to the actual physical data. We just did not have that many examples. But more importantly, it was commonly believed that most of the original data from the Ohio SETI project has been lost forever in 1998. That's actually when this observatory was officially closed. But turns out that this was maybe not the case. Between 2006 and 2017, Mark Abel managed to photograph over 75,000 printouts from the so-called N50CH software, the software that was also responsible for producing the WOW signal. And here he was able to create 1.24 terabyte dataset that also included the observations from 1977 to 1984. And so then, by using the modern computing technology and especially optical character recognition, scientists behind this recent study were able to meticulously transcribe and analyze decades and decades of observations from this radio telescope, in the process discovering several additional features of the signal by comparing it to everything else. And the first revision here was the location, because previously there was just a bit of ambiguity about the exact location, since this particular antenna contained two separate horns that observed the same region with a 3-minute interval. But the WOW signal was only discovered in one of them. And in this case, it was actually not clear which of the horns. And so the new reanalysis seems to have established that the new location is slightly more narrow and slightly displaced from earlier estimates, specifically about 7.24 arc minutes away from the original source, which allows future studies to possibly locate its origin. The second surprise here was the total intensity. Apparently the signal was even stronger than we initially thought. Previous estimates suggested that the signal was maybe about 54 to maybe 200 Janskis, but the new analysis using new calibration and cross-referencing from other sources suggests that the signal was at least 250 Jansky in total. But as you can see from this graph, that doesn't actually make it very strong compared to what we already know. So let's actually take a brief moment to briefly discuss what 250 Jansky would actually mean. In astronomy, this is a unit of spectral flux density, but that's very often used for determining intensity of a signal. And 1 Jansky is actually super small. It's like 10 to the power of minus 26 watts per square meter per 1 hertz. But that of course would not make much sense, so let's compare it to something more realistic. Let's start with the sun. When it's super quiet and has no emissions, it usually emits approximately 1000 Jansky at 20 MHz. In comparison, the Milky Way, or essentially the entire structure of the Milky Way visible from our own planet, usually emits approximately 1 million Jansky. But intriguingly, if there is a smartphone roughly around 1 kilometer away from the radio antenna, technically it can emit up to about 110 million Jansky if the signal is intercepted. And so here 250 Jansky is practically nothing. But when it comes to distant radio sources, it technically is quite a lot. This is something we expect from various central Milky Way regions and certain bright radio sources, such as some of the strongest radio sources in the night skies, for example magnetars or even powerful quasars. As a matter of fact, there are only a few astronomical radio sources that are known to emit such a high-level signal, making this event even more exceptional compared to what we previously thought, and also raising the question of whether other radio telescopes might have accidentally seen it too, while at the same time its frequency may have also been slightly different, but different by just a tiny decimal point in terms of megahertz. And though at first this may not seem important, it's important in terms of the analysis of where this came from. Because here the implication is that wherever this was, it had a much higher radio velocity than previously assumed. And that's because only Doppler shift, or redshift and blue shift, could have affected the frequency. And here this suggests the object was moving toward the Sun at approximately 84 kilometers per second, and also approximately 74 kilometers per second, in the so-called local standard of rest reference frame. And that particular part was discovered through the reanalysis of the original data. Apparently here there might have been a small mistake. A mistake that was not actually seen at first, and that was a result of some kind of a software update that happened back in 1977. And so by discovering these new properties, researchers have now come up with a few more explanations for where this possibly came from and for what actually caused it. Like in previous studies, pretty much most of them have been so far ruled out completely, and that includes potential alien civilization communication or even communication from planet Earth involving satellites or some other natural source right here on our own planet, with the signal's beam pattern implying that it very likely came from a very far point beyond Earth's orbit, and of course appearing stationary in the celestial background. And also because this particular frequency has been protected by astronomers for decades now, with 1420 MHz basically being the forbidden frequency, here it's almost certain that this came from outer space. But even when considering various harmonics, such as the second harmonic of 710 MHz or the third harmonic of 473 MHz, which is actually used by some TV stations, here it's been concluded that none of the TV stations or none of the radio transmission devices were using any of these signals in Ohio at this time. And most importantly, there were no known satellites in the location in August of 1977. And even any secret satellites by, for example, Soviet Union, which very often use what's known as the Molniya orbit, would not be able to create a signal lasting for 72 seconds. It would be much faster. This could also not be solar activity, because in August of 1977, the solar activity was generally very low, and this was unlikely to be some kind of an internal error or a software glitch, because the analysis of data for decades and decades afterwards and before that discovered nothing similar. The signal was indeed unique, and none of the previous detections showed anything similar. And so what could it then be, and what's the most likely explanation that so far most scientists seem to agree with? Well, here it's best to explain this by showing you this picture and this schematic. Here, all of the signs point at this being a somewhat unusual, somewhat rare, but also extremely powerful astrophysical event. And most likely what's known as a maser flare, also referred to as superradiance burst, from some kind of a small, cold, neutral hydrogen cloud, like the one you see right here. Or as someone described it in the previous video that I made approximately a few months ago, this was basically a hydrogen cloud fart. But in this case, a hydrogen fart produced as a result of some kind of a powerful object, such as for example a magnetar, illuminating the source from a slightly different angle. And so here you can kind of compare this to a very powerful laser shooting at a cloud and making the cloud suddenly brighten up in certain frequencies. And because this was a hydrogen cloud, it produced what's known as a hydrogen line. But much more importantly, this is not a new idea. This is actually a confirmation of a previous proposition as well, where researchers were even able to confirm this by observing so much similar events coming from different clouds that were producing extremely similar emissions, but just not as powerful. And so in some sense, this is a major confirmation for this really intriguing proposition from something like a year ago. Which of course suggests that these cold hydrogen clouds seem to be able to produce these very powerful emissions that possibly mimic communication from civilizations that we've been searching for since the beginning of SETI. And because the newly calculated velocity of 74 km per second actually matches other similar clouds, right now this seems to be the best possible explanation. And many such concentrations of hydrogen gas exist in the galactic halo and actually pretty much all over the place, usually produced by very powerful emissions from very massive stars that are either about to go supernova or are about to become white dwarfs, neutron stars, or black holes, with most of them leaving behind these extremely large clouds, moving at velocities of 25 to 90 kilometers per second. And we've actually discussed one of the recent discoveries from a few hundred light years away from us that seems to directly mimic one of these clouds and was actually discovered completely by accident. But in this case, it's in a different position from the wow signal, and so we don't think it was produced by that cloud. But this just proves that these clouds are all over the place, and when something very powerful shines on them, they can occasionally produce these very powerful radio emissions. But there's maybe one small problem with this explanation right now. At the moment, none of these clouds, or at least the ones we know of, have been able to produce anything as powerful as the wow signal, because at 250 Janskis, this makes it truly exceptional. And so there is still definitely a bit of a mystery, and there's maybe still a tiny chance that this is aliens after all. Probably not, but maybe. Which means that in the next few months, possibly the next few years, we'll hear more about this event and potential explanations, or possibly some other explanations involving something entirely different. So this is definitely not the end of the story yet. But I guess even more importantly, we now are pretty certain it was not some kind of a radio source coming from our own planet. It was definitely not satellites, and not emissions coming from the moon or the sun, and indeed seems to be something from very far away, from some kind of an astrophysical source. With this incredible work also serving as a really important reminder that some of the most surprising discoveries are basically hidden in plain sight, waiting to be unlocked with new perspectives and new analytical tools. But I guess for now, that's all I wanted to mention. We'll come back and discuss this more once there are some updates. Until then, check out the previous video in the description. All of the studies and relevant links should be somewhere right there as well. Thank you for watching, subscribe, come back tomorrow to learn something else. Support this channel on Patreon, where you can find additional videos without any ads, and can DM me directly, or by joining channel membership that grants you early access. Alternatively, you can also buy the Wonderful Person t-shirt in the description. Stay wonderful, I'll see you tomorrow, and as always, bye bye.